Hi boys and girls. The last time that we were at the Parker inheritance, Milo had kind of beaten up Brandon pretty bad and he ended up with a concussion. And Candace had just went over to his house to talk to him about the fact that she talked her mom into going back to her hometown a week later than they were supposed to. So that's where I'm going to start up again. He nodded. Candace looked closer to Brandon. Do you want to tell me about him? Brandon shrugged. They went back to staring at his bedsheets. Candace was willing to wait as long as necessary if he wanted to talk. Then she thought, friendship goes both ways. It was like one of those fancy bridges her dad sometimes inspected. Bridges over water that were so big and so long that they had to be constructed from both sides. She decided to go first. I didn't find that letter in any old box, she began. You probably didn't notice it, but the box in the attic was labeled for Candace. The letter was tucked into one of my old puzzle books. Brandon looked up. And the scribbles on the back of the envelope? That was my grandmother's handwriting. Find the path, solve the puzzle. I think it's a note addressed to me. Candace wished it was even darker in the room. That would have made things easier. She's the reason I like puzzles and mysteries so much. Crossword puzzles, riddle books, strategy games, you name it, she bought it. Every birthday, every Christmas. You think she was preparing you for this? Brandon asked. Candace nodded. And now it feels like I'm the only person left in the world to prove that she was right. Like it's my destiny. And if I fail, but we haven't failed yet. We know the fortune is there. Whether we find it or not, we know it's there. But the world doesn't know, Candace said. My grandma deserves more than being a punchline of somebody's bad jokes. Her name means something, just like everyone else's. Candace stopped talking because she knew if she said one more word, she would lose her battle with the tears. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Quincy is gay, Brandon said. Last year he told his parents and some of the teachers. Everyone freaked out. Well, almost everyone. Not you? He shook his head. He's been my friend since I moved here. He officially came out last year, but a part of me has always known. Brandon kicked his legs over the edge of the bed and sat beside Candace. It was strange. Most of the kids didn't really care. Some people were nice, but they still talked to him like he was, I don't know, like he was a whole different person. A few kids teased him a lot. Milo and his friends? They never hit him. That would have been easier. They just called him names. Bad names. Quincy was taking it pretty hard. That's why his parents sent him to stay with his grandparents for the summer. Are they trying to convert him or something? No, not at all. They're cool with it, he said. Again, if you've known him for a while, you kind of already knew. When my parents separated, they made me see a therapist, Candace said. It helped a lot. Maybe Quincy should do the same, and maybe you should too. Granddad doesn't believe in head doctors. I bet your mom would get one for you. Yeah, I know she would. He shifted on the bed. I haven't talked to Granddad since Saturday. What happened? Instead of immediately responding, Brandon began playing with the hem of his t-shirt. Candace quickly added, I mean, you don't have to tell me if you don't. No, it's okay, he said, letting the fabric go. Granddad saw me right after I found out you were leaving. I wasn't taking it so well. He laughed a little. Granddad told me to toughen up. I got mad and called him ancient and a dinosaur. And then he called me, some other stuff. Candace's stomach worked itself into a knot. She began flexing her fingers. Anyways, that's why I got grounded, he said. Did you tell your mom what he said to you? He nodded. She's pretty mad at both of us. She agreed that Granddad was from a whole different generation, but she also said that I can't call people names every time I get mad at them. So he gets to say whatever he wants then? That's not right. If it makes you feel better, she yelled at him more than she yelled at me. I'm sure she would have grounded him too if she could have. Well, once we find the money, you probably won't have to live with your granddad anymore, Candace said. As Brandon wrinkled his nose in response, Candace realized maybe that wasn't the solution he was hoping for. Maybe Brandon wanted to live with his granddad. He just wished his granddad treated him better. Actually, I think I'd use the money to start a basketball camp in the summer, Brandon said, for LGBTQIA kids, where it's safe to be whoever you want to be. where you don't have to worry about people saying nasty things to you on the basketball court. Candace's mind began to race. Maybe we could make it a camp for all sports, tennis too. Wouldn't that be cool? He cocked his head to the side. We? You want to start a camp with me? Sure, why not? We're partners, right? She grinned. And who knows, maybe I'd learn how to shoot a decent three-point shot. He laughed. There's no camp in the world that would help you with that. They fell quiet again. Candace wanted to ask him more about this camp. Was it for gay kids like Quincy or for gay kids like him? But he was her friend. If he needed to tell her something, he would. I brought you something. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her iPod. I know you can't watch TV or read, but maybe you can listen to music. Brandon took the iPod from her. He pushed the button to turn on, casting his face in the blue glow, then swiped through the music. These are old songs. My dad likes to call them classic. He pressed play, and September started. This is my mom's favorite song by Earth, Wind & Fire, since she was born on September 21st. Oh, okay. That's one of the lyrics. No, it isn't, Candace said. Really? Really, it is. He turned up the music, then started singing along. Do you remember the 21st night of September? They're saying when we were young in September. Brandon covered his mouth as he yawned. Check the lyrics online when you get home. If I'm right, you owe me a chili cheese dog. Deal. Candace rose from the bed. Wait, one more thing. He let out a long, shaky breath. Sorry for what I said out there to Milo. You know, the stuff about his mom. It was... Well, I'm sorry. It's okay, she said. I mean, I was a little surprised, but I'm not mad at you. She rubbed her arm. If anything, I should be the one saying sorry. If I hadn't yelled your name like that, you wouldn't have been sucker punched. Candace was afraid she'd remember the way he fell against the sidewalk for the rest of her life, the sound his body made when it slammed against the concrete. It was like a stupid infomercial that was on repeat in her head. See, that's exactly why I'm apologizing, Brandon said. The way you looked at me, he sniffed. I'm not like that. I don't want you thinking of me like that once you go back home. Okay? Brandon, don't worry. I know who you really are. She had just reached the door when he said, Oh, and Candace. She turned around. You're not the only person left in the world to prove that your grandmother was right, he said. We're partners, remember? I've always got your back. Candace beamed at him. And I've always got yours. Chapter 40, Siobhan, Washington, 1958 through 1985. Mama, I'm home, Siobhan said as she stepped into the house and pulled off her heavy winter coat. She let the door bang shut behind her. Home. When had her aunt's worn beige carpets, wood-paneled walls, and stucco ceilings come to represent home? Was it when she enrolled in the local school, when Perkins High School fired her father, when the Lambert police finally declined to press charges against the Allens, when her parents' lawyer told them that they'd taken things as far as they could legally? Mama, she called again. The car was outside, and her father hardly ever left home anymore. Where were they? She paused upon entering the kitchen. Her parents sat at the table in the dark. Ever since his attack, her father didn't like sitting in brightly lit rooms. It made his constant headaches much worse. Her mother rose from the table and walked over to Siobhan. When she was near, Siobhan could see that her mother's face was wet. It's Reggie, she said quietly. He passed away. What? How? Was it? Siobhan had to stop to take a breath. In the darkness, her fingers found her wrist, her bracelet. She pressed it against her skin. Was it Marion Allen? Her mother shook her head. Reggie died in Georgia. According to Coach Douglas, he found work on a shrimping boat. There was an accident out in the water, and he went overboard. Siobhan's mother hugged her then, and that's when the tears truly began to fall. It had been 6 months since she'd last seen Reggie. She had been waiting, hoping he would show up. She hadn't known where he was. All Coach Douglas would tell her was that he was safe. When's the funeral? She asked. There won't be one, her mother replied. They couldn't find his, the waves were too strong. She patted her daughter's back. Coach Douglas and Reggie's grandma are going to hold a small memorial at the church. She pulled away and looked at Siobhan. But we can't go. Siobhan let go of her mother. Mama, you can't be serious. If the Allens knew you were back in town, there's no telling what they'd do to you. I can't let it happen. Her voice was shaking. We already lost Reggie. We can't lose you, too. Siobhan crossed her arms. Well, I could sneak back on my own. Yes, you could, she said. But do you think Reggie would want that? If he were here, he'd say... She stopped as the phone rang. That's probably your aunt. I need to answer it. She touched Siobhan's cheek, then walked away toward the hallway. But before she left the kitchen, she flipped on the lights, illuminating the room. Leanne, the light! Her father barked from the table, covering his eyes. Even with a reconstructed jaw, her father still slurred his words a little. But Siobhan had grown to understand his speech. Her mother kept going down the hallway, leaving Siobhan there to stare at her father. His eyes still closed, he pointed at the wall. Do you mind? He began. Siobhan remained in place. I'm going to stop right there. So, they even told Siobhan that Reggie was dead, even though he isn't. So do you think that Reggie, as James Parker, is going to go back and visit Siobhan ever? Do you think she's ever going to know that he isn't really dead?